Welcome to the Serve Campus podcast, a resource for campus ministry workers across Canada, providing education, inspiration, and coaching for people leading campus ministries. Our goal is to encourage and resource you in your vital work on universities, colleges, institutes, wherever you are. Our heart and vision for this podcast is rooted in Mark 10:25. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So the idea of serving isn't just a slogan. Serve Campus Network has a multifaceted approach to ministry. And we're excited to be sharing that with students all across the nation. We aim to be helpful producers rather than consumers. Our question for those who are listening today is, how can we help serve you? Well, we hope this podcast can help answer that question in some small way today. And now, here's your host, Jordan Clark.
Hello, and thank you for listening to this podcast today. In this episode, we have a special guest, David Burke from Ryerson University in Ontario, and he runs a campus ministry called Lifeline there, and he's also the national leader for our program called RedFrogs that the PAOC runs in this country. And I'm a newer person that has been accepted by the Red Frog family, and David has been an awesome inspiration in my life and a strong leader in my life in us beginning this ministry. So it's a privilege to have you on today, David. And David, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a privilege to be here with you guys in this digital room of sorts. Yeah, doing well.
It is so cool to be in 3 different parts of the country and to be able to do this. It's pretty amazing. So yeah.
I'm just conscious of the fact we have all, like, if you break the country into thirds, we've got each third kind of represented, as it were, which is pretty, yeah. Anyway.
It is crazy. So for those of you listening, John is in BC right now. He was the one that introduced us today. And then I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan. And like I said before, David's in Ontario. So David, tell us a bit about yourself and your family. And one of your favorite pastimes or things you like to do. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my wife and I are coming up to 9 years married, which is pretty crazy. And we have 2 incredible children. We have a daughter who's 6 and a son is our son is 2. And so when we're not working, most of our free time is spent with them, playing with Lego and cleaning up the Lego and coloring and then cleaning up the coloring and playing with Play-Doh and then cleaning up the Play-Doh and all that kind of stuff. As far as what else I do with my free time, I really enjoy running. That's become like a really big part of my life, especially in COVID. Just a really big kind of anxiety, let go of tension. That's not all I do in my free time. I don't finish work and then just like throw on my running shoes and run all night. I just love being with my wife and whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're watching a show on Netflix or we're reading together or planning something in our future. Yeah, it's kind of what I do in my free time, I guess.
Yeah, like, do you both have a favorite show that you're watching right now on Netflix or streaming services or anything?
Right now, we just finished Modern Family, which I love. There's so many shows. Downton Abbey is one that we've loved.
That is a classic. So good.
It's so good. Yeah, if you haven't seen Downton Abbey, highly recommend it. I don't think there's like a particular show that we're like super into right now, binging. I'm sure that there will be one because it feels like you can't consume everything on streaming these days. Like there's not enough time, and nor would I want to spend all day watching.
And there's like multiple apps, and there's multiple ways to watch, and it's just the amount of content is insane. So yeah,
it's crazy.
So tell us a bit about yourself and just your specifically with your call to Ryerson
Yeah.
University,
Mm-hmm.
how did that happen? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
were you called? How did you know you were called? And when did you start working there?
Yeah, so I knew that I was called to ministry at 13, but I had no idea that it was going to look like what it does today. So when I was kind of in the middle of high school, God started to whisper this idea about campus ministry. And I was like, okay, God, cool. But like, gotta finish high school, I have to go to post-secondary myself. And so kind of put it on the back burner. And actually, in those latter high school years, I ended up getting connected with Mission Canada and starting to learn more about campus ministry through a guy named Rob Powell. And then again, kind of putting that on the back burner and God kind of simmering it in the background, and every so often would whisper campus ministry. And when I was in my final year of Bible college, in my fourth year, the internship that I was doing, a large part of it, by God's providence, just so happened to be helping with this fledgling campus ministry in Ottawa. And so at the time, I was like, "Oh, what a coincidence!" But definitely was not a coincidence, and it was really cool getting a chance to see this thing starting from kind of grassroots, and God really started to get a hold of my heart for campus ministry through that, and kind of seeing what it could look like. And so in that internship, God very much took it off the back burner and put it on the front burner. And through a series of different circumstances and moments in prayer, God very much clarified, like, okay, this is on the front burner now, and after you graduate, I want you to start this. And I had this kind of conversation with God that I think of as kind of my mini Moses conversation. Not that God called me to lead a nation, but simply in the sense of God called me to go do something. And I had this laundry list of reasons as to why, it's not me, too young, not enough experience, and all my insecurities, all of these different things. And I felt so clearly that God was like, those are all the reasons that I do want you to do this in the here and now, because you know that nothing is going to happen in your own strength. And that's very much been the case for Lifeline. So how specifically I ended up at Ryerson, as God was clarifying this call to campus ministry, we were like, okay, God, campus ministry, but like where, right? Like there's so many different campuses, and I literally happened to stumble into a meeting downtown Toronto where a bunch of Pentecostal pastors were talking about the need for a Pentecostal campus ministry at Ryerson University. And again, I was like, oh, what a coincidence. And then I was like, wait a second, what if this isn't a coincidence? And really started to pray about that. Started to spend time on campus, watching the students. Who are they? Where are they going? Kind of what's the how are they behaving, that sort of thing, and trying to listen to what the Spirit of God was saying, and doing research into the demographics. And through that process, God really clarified and further distilled it down that, like, Ryerson is your home away from home. This is where you were meant to be. This is where you're meant to plant this new campus ministry, this new campus church. So went through the process to become a Mission Canada worker, all the fundraising, prayer preparation, training, all that kind of stuff. And on September 10th, 2013, we launched Lifeline. And kind of the rest is history. I don't know if you want me to talk about kind of how I got connected with RedFrogs or...
Well, yeah, we'll get there, but that's...
Okay,
so
cool.
2013, you launched everything, which is...
Yeah.
And you're still doing it, right?
Yeah.
Now with that progress, like some of those early struggles that you talked about, like what's that journey been like since 2013? Where and specifically, like how would you define your role, and what do you do as a leader with the group, and how has that evolved over that time, and how has that changed?
Such a good question. It has definitely been the adventure of a lifetime. It has been harder than I ever thought it would, but also more life-giving and more exciting than I ever thought that it could be. Ryerson's a really interesting campus. Not that I have a lot to compare it to. It's the only campus that I've done kind of long-term ministry on, but it's very, I would say, anti-Christian, but not anti-Jesus. And I think a lot of people think that they are anti-Jesus, but they're actually anti-Christian, or a specific kind or brand or flavor of Christianity that they've seen that was off-putting. So I often feel like at Ryerson, we have to work kind of twice as hard to undo the false preconceived notions that people already have. Ryerson is located right at Yonge and Dundas in Toronto. It's just adjacent to the Eaton Centre, which is a big mall downtown. And right on that corner is where students kind of come and go. So one of the main hubs, transportation hubs, is Dundas Station. And so as they're going in and out of campus, that's often the station that they're using. And that's kind of also a hub for various street preachers in the city. And the vast majority of the street preachers that utilize that corner are preaching a very doom and gloom, turn or burn, sinful, wretched kind of flavor of Christianity. And so that's often their first exposure to Christianity every single day. And so by the time that we meet them, they've already got these ideas in their head about who Jesus is and all that sort of stuff. So that's definitely presented obstacles. And I think there's something to be said for longevity of people seeing that, like, this is our home away from home. This is a campus that we love. And so what does it actually look like is a great question. We, for many years, met in the back of the campus pub. It was called the VIP bar. It was kind of this separate little room in the back behind the pool tables. And so we would have church there. We'd have a time of prayer. We'd have a time of worship. I would preach a message, always trying to make it as discussion oriented as I could, knowing that after like 3 to 6 hours of lectures, students wanted to kind of interact and chew stuff up. Early on, we started this thing called Tough Question Tuesday, where students could submit questions on anything from specific scriptural questions to like sex or sexuality or drugs or alcohol, drinking, whatever the case may be. And right from the very beginning, that is something that students have really gravitated towards, is being able to vocalize and air out doubt in a safe atmosphere and be able to work through things together, and always taking it back to what does Scripture say about these various things. So Lifeline has changed a lot in the last number of years, and each year that we've moved forward, we've been able to kind of build upon years previous. And so it's become this really incredible family of students who love Jesus and who love each other. On a personal level, I've always, not always, for many years, kind of described God's presence as home. The story of the prodigal son, being invited back home, being welcomed back home, that's what God's presence feels like for me. It's a place where I am welcomed. It's a place where I am at peace, where I am fulfilled, where I am comforted, where I'm encouraged, where I'm also challenged and inspired to go out from, to go and do and go and be. And so that's what we try and make Lifeline. That's what I think church is meant to be, this home to which all are welcomed and can be made whole in Christ, and then sent out to go and live that out and share Jesus with other people. And so that's what Lifeline is. A campus church that functions as a home, an expression of the kingdom of God, an expression of his church.
So that little before COVID, like before, I guess last year happened.
Before the world drastically changed.
Yeah, like were you still meeting in that back room?
No, great question. Okay. So even that is a funny story. So we showed up September a number of years ago for our fall kickoff, and we got all our gear. We're lugging it in there, and our jaw dropped, shocked to find that they had over the summer demolished the entire wall that separated the VIP room from the rest of the bar.
Oh wow!
And so it wasn't a quiet space anymore. And so we were like, oh my gosh, God, what do we do? And just really felt through prayer in that like few moments that we had to make a decision that God still wanted us to continue to be his church there. And so that's what we decided to do. And so literally like 6 feet away from pool tables and people that are like wasted and watching, you know, whatever sports game is on, we had church and we sung worship and we prayed and dug into God's word together. And there would be moments where we would be, you know, earnestly praying for someone whose family member was sick. And all of a sudden, people 6 feet away from us would start screaming at the top of their lungs, obscenity at the screen as they're watching a game. And we'd literally have to like pause our prayer for a moment until they finished and then continue. And so that definitely presented challenges, but it also was really cool to see students just wander in because they heard music or they heard talking and they were like, oh, what is this? And so so many interactions that we had with students came through that of them hearing the gospel or them hearing worship, whatever the case may be. So from there, we ended up moving to a room that is in the heart of the student center. And we've been there for the last number of years.
That's
before
awesome.
COVID,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. No, that's so cool. And we're going to get to COVID in a minute, but the beast that is COVID.
Yes,
but you
exactly.
talked about this center right near the school, right near the campus, where there was like this graceless teaching happening or this graceless preaching happening. I would say that RedFrogs is the exact opposite of that. It's full of grace, and it's a program where we go into alcohol-fueled environments and we take care of people that are drinking by giving them water, setting up conversations just around safety, right? Just around, do you need to walk back to your room? Do you need, we just started RedFrogs right before COVID, and even in the first 5 months of running RedFrogs, 5 or 6 months, 5 months, we saw so much positive interaction happening, and it helped us build a relationship with our campus that still exists, even with the different student union elected in. It still has carried us over. So it's a powerful tool. And tell us a bit about that hat that you wear with RedFrogs.
Yeah.
What does your national role look like? What's the vision for RedFrogs? And yeah.
So I got connected to RedFrogs. I started hearing about it a few years after we had launched Lifeline at Ryerson and learning more about RedFrogs. And we had this desire to start a RedFrogs site at Ryerson. And again, not a coincidence, God's provision. Ryerson's administration actually contacted RedFrogs Canada and said, hey, we have this event coming up. Can you guys, do you have a site here? Can you send a team? And so because we were already kind of in the process, the national coordinator for RedFrogs at the time set Lifeline up as the facilitators of Ryerson's RedFrog site. And so the first event that we ever did was a concert during Frosh Week. It was like nothing I had ever experienced before. Future was the headlining artist that night. Had never heard of him beforehand. And then the Smash thing, Drake ended up showing up towards the end of the concert, and
wow.
6,000 students were on Ryerson's main street. And because it was outside, you could smoke whatever you want and drink whatever you want. And they did. And we had a hydration station tent set up at the back of the crowd. And we gave out thousands of cups of water and RedFrogs gummies and donuts and cookies, and sent out roaming teams to the crowd to make sure that the students were safe and that they were okay. And it was such an incredible night, and the connections and the relationships that we built with students, the conversations that we got a chance to have. And I'll never forget being there as towards the end, Drake and Future were performing some hits from their new album. And every lyric, every word, every phrase was dripping in sex and drugs and violence and glorification of all of these things that make us less who we are, and are not a part of what the abundant life is. And I stood there in the back with tears in my eyes, just thinking, God, this isn't okay. Like, these are your kids. And so it just like reinforced this dream in my heart that I want thousands of students to worship God, not so that there's a crowd of thousands of students, but simply so that their lives can be changed, so that prodigal sons and daughters can come home. So to your point, RedFrogs is this beautiful outflow of what Jesus' love looks like practically, or can look like on campuses. And so, like you said, we get a chance to come in and serve with no strings attached. And really our heart, our ethos as RedFrogs is to safeguard a generation. And so we want to protect students from sexual violence. We want to protect them from overdoses. We want to be a positive peer presence to provide diversionary activities. And so that's what we've been doing at Ryerson for the last number of years. And then about two and a half or so years ago, I then got to become the Interim National Coordinator for RedFrogs Support Network Canada. And so that's been really cool. And I get a chance to serve and oversee and sew into our RedFrog sites across Canada. And that's just been an absolute joy.
Yeah, and it's an amazing, RedFrogs has changed my life. And I remember first, and it's an amazing ministry or program too, because students really like doing it. Students really like being a part of it. And it's just a really cool interaction that you have with your current students, or if you want to, it's just, that's the one thing I really liked about it. Now with RedFrogs, like, you told us what the organization is about. Where is the organization from, and how many sites are there in our country currently?
Yeah, great question. So RedFrogs started in Australia with a youth pastor at a local church. He would go and hang out at skate parks, and slowly built a relationship with these students, would skate with them and have fun with them and disciple them where they were at, mentor them. And Australia has this thing called schoolies after students graduate before they go into university. It's this like Mardi Gras kind of on steroids, but it's like minors without parental supervision. And so for a lot of students, it's the first time where like they're away from their parents and they can just like go crazy. And so 17,000 students will descend on the Gold Coast for a week of partying, concerts, etc. So Andy Gourley, the founder of RedFrogs, knew that his students were going to be going to schoolies. And he was like, I don't want to just let them go to the wolves. And so he found out at schoolies what hotel they were staying at and went to go visit them, but the security guard wouldn't let him in. And so as he had developed a relationship with these students, when he would go, he would give out these little gummies in the shape of a red frog, and kind of became known as, this is the RedFrogs dude. And so that day when he tried to visit his students but couldn't get in, he went to the local store, grabbed some RedFrogs gummies, went back to the security guard and said, hey, I just want to give my students some candy, some munchies. They're like, oh, awesome. And so he gets in and he's knocking on doors trying to find his students, and eventually he does. And being there in that atmosphere spawned this greater vision, this possibility of being able to safeguard students in an atmosphere where the church was not typically present. And so fast forward 20 years to where we are today. In Australia, RedFrogs is massive. They're on every single major university, which is insane. They also have board riders, which is a whole different program, and they're involved in high school assemblies to educate students before they go to university. It's then gone from there to South Africa, to Poland, the United Kingdom, United States, Fiji, and a couple of others I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's international is the point. And came to Canada in 2011. How many sites we have right now? We currently have 12. Before COVID, we had a few more that had to go on hiatus due to COVID and restrictions of what they were and were not allowed to do. And so before COVID, the year before COVID, we served over 120,000 students across Canada through our various campuses. Which is so cool. And we're so thankful for that. Really what we are particularly excited about with RedFrogs is the ones. RedFrogs is all about the ones. So as much as concerts of thousands of students is incredible, what we are really looking for is those meaningful moments with students where we're able to pour into them, where we're able to encourage them, to build relationship, to affirm them, to love on them. And so RedFrogs has definitely changed in COVID. We've had to evolve. A lot of our campuses have been doing activities online, some collaborative events between different campuses. Some campuses are doing care packages delivered to dorms if they're open, all kinds of different things. But RedFrogs is very, very agile. And it's been really cool to see the innovation that our campus coordinators across the country have just been pouring themselves into, and the creativity that they have.
That's awesome. And you said RedFrogs is about the ones. So do you have a specific story that you want to share with us about a student that you worked with, something that's inspirational or something that inspired you with that?
So for me personally on my campus, one of the things that we've loved doing, again, before COVID, when you could actually do this, were pancake breakfasts. So we would come and bring a couple skillets and pancake batter and all the fixings, all of your unhealthy toppings. And we would go at 7 a.m. and set up in the student learning center or the student campus center, and we would cook hundreds of pancakes for hundreds of students. And the really cool thing about pancakes and butter is that the smell spreads really fast. And so students would sometimes come from floors up, and they'd be like, I smell butter, I smell pancakes, and I came down, or I saw someone else with pancakes and I followed my nose. And so at one of those particular events, we were just giving out pancakes and talking with students, and got to meet this student who had done some prior education in Ottawa, had moved to the city, was looking for a Jesus following community, and didn't really know anyone in the city. And through talking to her and building that connection there, we got to tell her, hey, most of us in this RedFrogs team are also part of this thing called Lifeline, and we'd love to invite you to that. And so from there, she actually became a really integral part of our Lifeline church community, and started coming to Bible studies and services and social events and all of these different things. And so because of RedFrogs, we built that relationship and were able to disciple her, and she brought other friends who don't know Jesus. And it's just really cool to see, again, with those ones, right? What can happen. Other events that we've done, really cool. We'd give out these exam candygrams, which is awesome. And we love that. But we were like, what is a way that we could help students encourage each other? And so every student that would come up to the table to take an exam candygram, we had these little cue cards, and we invited them to write an encouraging message for someone behind them in line, and take one that someone else had written for them. And so many students were like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I'd love to encourage someone. And I'll never forget, there was this one guy, he had to have been 6'5" or 6'7", and just I don't even want a candygram, but I just want you guys to know how much this encouragement means to me. Nobody talks to me like this. Nobody treats me like this. And so, seeing moments where students are hugging each other, or students are on the side, crying with one of our volunteers, talking about how stressful exams are. And so this moment, something that is small, right? Giving out these little gummies, it's an open door to relationship, to encouragement, to affirmation, to recognizing the image of God in all of these students that we get a chance to meet. And so with RedFrogs, we always view every single interaction that we have with a student, whether it's 5 seconds or, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, as God is entrusting that student to us for those moments. And so how can we make the most of them? How can we remind them of who they are?
Yeah, and you kind of covered a bit how it looks like in COVID for RedFrogs side. And we're all in the same boat. I know we have different restrictions in each province, but I know for even people watching this and listening, it's been a little frustrating. It's been sometimes disheartening, also, and other times encouraging, like you just said, with the grocery handouts and the food runs and all that stuff. For Lifeline, how has COVID looked? Like, are you are you still doing your services? How is that looking?
Yeah, great question. So I'll never forget, probably as long as I live, on March 13th, 2020, flabbergasted me, Ryerson shut down. So we got word that Friday that the campus was closed. And, we were like, okay, is this going to be a week? Is it going to be 2 weeks? It's probably going to be a couple of weeks. And so over that weekend, we very quickly had to pivot. We all love that word now, pivot. We had to pivot and figure out how to continue to share Jesus and disciple students and foster that sense of home, that sense of family and community online. And so at the time, we ended up moving our services onto Instagram Live. And so Tuesdays at 6:00, when we would traditionally meet in person, we'd pop up on our Lifeline feed, Instagram Live, and we'd have our worship leaders lead remotely from their house, students in worship, in real time. And then I would preach a message online, and students and our leaders would interact in the chat, and sometimes they'd ask questions or different stuff like that. And so we moved our Bible studies to Zoom, one-on-one discipleship to like FaceTime or FB Messenger chat, like whatever their preferred platform is, phone calls, all that kind of stuff. Doing social events on Instagram Live. We've since moved our services to YouTube Live. And so there's definitely been a long process of tweaking and trying to figure out what works best. But in essence, all of the things that we were doing before, we've continued to do just online. What we are not able to do is one of the things that has always been such a part of Lifeline is the breaking bread together. So before COVID, after every single one of our weekly services, we would order a few $100s worth of like pub grub. So like French fries, chicken wings, pizza, salad, all that kind of stuff. And we would have family dinner together every week. And so after we finished service, we'd roll out these tables. And so much of the relationship building and so much of the discipleship happened in those moments after the service, where students were able to, hey, you talked about this, or here's a question, or, here's my friend who doesn't know Jesus, and let's talk about this. And so we miss out on that. Unfortunately, there's stuff like that we just can't do because of COVID. Yeah. At the same time, God's not dead. And as much as God didn't cause COVID, it's not a surprise to him. And so for whatever reason, God created me and you and John and all of us to live during this period of human history, right? You could have been born 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future. And so you and me and all of us have something specific that we can bring to the table. And so very much trying to lean into what is that? What can Lifeline offer students, right? How can we help them experience the fullness of God's presence, whether it be online or in person? So, yeah, it's been a journey.
Well, and it's so encouraging to hear what you've been doing. It's encouraging to see that it hasn't stopped. It's just continued in a totally different way. Like you said, you pivoted, right? We love that word, of course. Like you said, when it comes to our Serve Campus network and the different models, we have the 5 C's. So we have campus, church, chaplaincy, church-based, club, and creative. So what, your whole ministry, Lifeline and RedFrogs, what C's or which C's would they fall under?
Yeah, great question. So multiple. RedFrogs would definitely be the creative initiatives for sure. That's a really unique and creative way for us to model the life and the love of Jesus. So we absolutely love that, and that's a big part of what we do. Lifeline would be the campus church / club. So the way that Ryerson works for the first number of years that Lifeline existed, we didn't have official like club status on campus. And so during the campus groups fairs, they wouldn't give us a table. There was one time where they were like, okay, you can pay $2,000 for a table. And I was like, okay, I'll pay it. And then they were like, oh, sorry, we have none available now. And I was like, okay, cool. And so, but that didn't stop us from being there. And so we didn't have a table. We didn't have anything. We literally stood on the street corners and gave out packs of gum with stickers on them, inviting students to come to Lifeline and meeting them and trying to, hey, make connections and all that sort of stuff. And so really dodgy looking back at it. I'm surprised that some people did come. But once we actually got club status, there's certain things that we have to do to maintain that. And so you have to have a certain number of signing members, you have to have an executive and constitution, all these kinds of things. So in the eyes of Ryerson's administration, Lifeline is an official campus club. And what we operate as is a campus church. So kind of both of those things. And then our students and staff at Lifeline operate RedFrogs Ryerson. Which is the creative initiatives.
You know what? It's so cool. You say it was dodgy looking back on it, but it's so cool that like you gained students and made an effect on people simply because you were building a relationship by serving and by offering not only just services, but offering just a helping hand. And people really, I mean, that is such an effective way to share the gospel and to just build a relationship with even institutions that we think might not really like us or whatever, because we all have preconceived ideas going into things. But I've specifically learned to just leave it up to God and obey him and look at people and value people just as God values everyone, regardless of who you are. And it's amazing what God can do through you. So it's really cool to hear that. And even out there right now, because COVID's kind of making a lot of clubs really hard to operate right now. And it's just all up in the air, but it's encouraging to see that you can still be effective, even if, let's say ratification goes away for a year or something like that. Right. It's encouraging to hear that. So, so thank you so much, David, for joining us today and for being here.
My absolute pleasure.
Thank you for being in my life too. And I know there are some months where we don't connect, but you have been encouraging to me. So I do appreciate that. And where can our listeners connect with you? How can we,
Instagram probably be the best. When we started Lifeline, Facebook was the primary mode of communication for students. And now we all know it's not. And so, Instagram, send me a DM. You can find me, David Burke.
Okay.
My picture's there. And I'd love to connect with anyone and everyone. You can find Lifeline on there as well. You can find RedFrogs Canada on Instagram. And you can find many of our various specific RedFrog sites on Instagram as well to see what's going on across the country.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, David. And it was great to do this. And it's awesome just to hear the different lessons that can be learned through this. And thank you so much for listening and watching this. We hope this was effective in your ministry. And please reach out to the Serve Campus Network. All of our information and David's information that he just gave is going to be in our show notes. So please, please reach out to us. Please, my name again is Jordan, and John introduced us. David's here, so you can name us in those emails if you want to connect with us directly. And please reach out to us if you just want to serve a campus or you don't know where to start, or if you're seasoned and you want to ask us any questions, or you want to even maybe be on this podcast, please reach out to us and let us know. So thank you so much for listening and watching, and have a great day.